Amen.
Safe Sanctuary is the name of the policy that has been adopted by the United Methodist Church. So this is a United Methodist Church policy, and the purpose of Safe Sanctuary is to come up with a system by which we can care for children, youth, and vulnerable adults, specifically for the purpose of preventing child abuse. Child abuse is not something that any of us take any joy in talking about, but it is an important thing that we need to talk about today because the rules and policies that we are going to talk about is our way of providing a safe space, not only for our children, but also for the volunteers as well. And we'll talk about why that is so important as we go along. The purpose of Safe Sanctuary is to fulfill the trust placed in us to protect other people's children, youth, and vulnerable adults. And this was something that Brandon Dirks used to do during the training, is that he liked to start with the love chapter. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Safe Sanctuary is born out of that desire to love our children. The first line there that talks about love is patient is a particularly good one to point out, because Safe Sanctuary is clunky. It is not always the most convenient thing to do. And you will find yourself as a volunteer sort of saying to yourself, oh man, if only we didn't have Safe Sanctuary, we could do this. Or, oh, back in my day when I was in youth group, we could always do this. Now we can't do that. But I urge you all to seek patience and to follow the policies as best as we can, because our goal here is to reduce the risk of child abuse, and this is something that is a humongous problem, not just in our world and in our country, but right here in Jefferson County, and that's why these things are in place. Fulfilling our promise also extends from the baptismal covenant, and as you know, and we baptized a child at the 9 o'clock service today, every time that we baptize a child, we go through this liturgy. The pastor says, members of the household of faith, I commend to your love and care this child whom we this day recognize as a member of the family of God. Will you endeavor so to live that this child may grow in the knowledge and love of God through our Savior Jesus Christ? And this is the line that we all respond with God's help. We will so order our lives after the example of Christ that this child, surrounded by steadfast love, may be established in the faith and confirmed and strengthened in the way that leads to life eternal. Safe Sanctuary means that this is an extension of this covenant, this promise that we make. When a child is gifted to our community from Christ, we want to honor that child, protect that child, and love that child. And that means providing a safe environment for that child to grow in their relationship with Jesus Christ. The church is at risk. This is an important screen because I think it's tempting for us to think that, well, we are at church and everyone here is a Christian, so certainly child abuse is not something that would happen in a church, right? Because we're all Christian and we would not do that. But actually the opposite is true. Those who abuse children, those people who are chronic abusers of children, churches are actually one of the places that they seek out for the very reason that we might not suspect them. So for example, churches tend to be trusting organizations. We are supposed to be trusting. We are supposed to love one another. We are supposed to be slow to anger, quick to forgive. These are things that are just built into the fabric of being a Christian. So of course we want to be trusting. We want to be trusting of people. Number two is this term volunteer default. I know that Leanne and Chris would agree with me that one of the big things that we do as leaders of children and youth programming is recruit volunteers. And of course, there's always turnover for that, and we are always on the lookout for folks who can help us. And the more help we get, the better. It is tempting for a lot of churches who are so desperate for volunteers that they will seek out anyone who might be willing. Hey, can you come on Wednesday night and help us with this? Or all you need to do is take the kids to the bathroom, those types of things. So Safe Sanctuary is in place to help us fight against that tendency, because churches a lot of times are so desperate for volunteers that they don't vet the volunteers the way that they probably should. And then the last line that I have there, many relational-oriented programs with children and youth. That is to say that we want to be volunteers. You want to be a volunteer because you like kids, and you want to develop relationships with kids, and you want to mentor them, and you want to laugh with them, and you want to, have a good time with them and grow in your relationship with God as they grow in their relationship. Those are healthy, perfectly natural things, and certainly why I wanted to get in working with kids. But the downside of that, of course, is that increases vulnerability, that increases risk, because we want to have those relationships with our kids, but there are boundaries, and we cannot assume and should not assume that we all know where those boundaries are. We all need to make sure that we are in agreement, in covenant with one another about where those boundaries are going to be, and how we're going to make sure that those boundaries are enforced. Okay? Safe Sanctuary congregations seek to protect our children, youth, and vulnerable adults. But item 2, we also seek to protect the volunteers. The policies that we are going to talk about, that some of you already know because you've gone through this before, these policies are not just here to protect our children, they are here to protect you as well. And as we go through the training, I'll talk a little bit about why that is so important and what kind of situation might arise in which your safety could possibly be jeopardized. We are devoted to reducing the risk of child abuse. I wish that there was something that we could do that would guarantee with 100% certainty that no abuse would happen, but that is a very difficult thing to do. One of the things that we know about child abusers in a general sense is that they're very seasoned and they're very good at it, and they hide in plain sight. They look like everybody else. There is no defining quality about their actions that sets them apart. They don't dress different. They don't look different. They don't smell different. It's nothing like that. They hide in plain sight. And they are practiced and they are seasoned at isolating children, at testing boundaries, at crossing boundaries, at breaking rules in a way that kind of fudges the line and makes leaders sort of think, well, and we make excuses. And then the next thing you know, sometimes there can be a problem. So it is important for us to follow these rules to reduce that risk, because you cannot possibly know who the danger might be. And that's why it's important for all of us to be held to the same standard. And then we're going to develop policies and procedures for its volunteers who work with children, youth, and vulnerable adults. That, of course, is what we are doing today. This is the scary screen. In 2017, over 4 million cases were reported for child abuse and neglect, and that's reported cases. And a lot of times, there are many, many other cases that are never reported. I'm sure that Kayla, because she works in social work, I'm sure she could tell us tons and tons of stories of things that she has experienced and the stats that she knows. But if you break that down, you can sort of see where the numbers go there. 7 children every minute, 1 child every 10 seconds. That's a horrifying thought. 1 out of every 3 girls is sexually abused before the age of 17. I find that nauseating. That is an extremely high number. 1 out of every 6 boys is sexually abused before the age of 18. 2,000 deaths occur each year as a result of child abuse and neglect. This is horrifying that these numbers are as bad as they are. This is an extremely serious and unfortunately common problem. All the more reason for us to be so careful. For the 3rd straight year, Kentucky leads the United States in reported child abuse cases. This was the reason that we did the 1,000 Prayers for Children as a church. That happened about a year ago before COVID. That was born out of this particular concern. For whatever reason, this is particularly high here in the state of Kentucky. So we need to be very, very careful. So Safe Sanctuary training, how to carry out your ministry without providing opportunities for abusers to harm our children, youth, or vulnerable adults. So the first thing, I'm sorry, that screen's a little messed up, isn't it? We're going to talk about basic operational procedures. Now, not all of these things are your responsibility. Most of these things are actually our responsibility, us being the staff, Leanne, Chris, and me. We bear a certain degree of responsibility to make sure that our volunteers are vetted, to make sure that our volunteers are trained, to make sure that certain things are put in motion, like background checks and whatnot. That responsibility does not fall on you, the volunteer. However, it's important for you to know what's happening. So that you know exactly how it is that we vet our volunteers and what kind of covenant we agree to for selecting our volunteers and that sort of thing. So that's just a little bit sort of, kind of over the top there. But what it says is that we are screening our volunteers. And the screening process means volunteer application form, 2 reference checks, 6-month activity before supervisory role, criminal background check, and then the annual refresher. All of these things are happening. Now, you may not be doing all of these things necessarily. Like, for example, I did not make Alex McDonald or Kayla, my volunteers, fill out a volunteer application form. And I did not make them submit 2 reference checks. And the reason for this is because I already know both of those people. I have served with both of those people. And so as a staff member, I can waive those 2 requirements. If they are people that are already a part of the life of my ministry and I know them, then that does not have to happen. However, what I can't and what we can't bend on is number 3, which is 6 months activity before a supervisory role. What that means is that if you want to work with children, you need to have been a part of the ministry of Christ Church United Methodist for at least 6 months. You do not need to be a member. That is not a requirement. But you have to have had 6 months of activity and involvement here at the church. The reason that rule is in place is to prevent people who have not been a part of the life of the church, who we don't know very well, all of a sudden being in a leadership role, and it prevents volunteer recruiters like me from just going for the next available person. So if someone comes in, is new to the life of the church, has a passion for youth, and wants to get involved, I'm thrilled, and I know Chris is thrilled as well, but we got to wait 6 months because that is the policy and the covenant that we have agreed to. The 4th item here is a criminal background check. This is a little different than how it's been done in the past. It used to be that every volunteer at Christ Church had a criminal background check done every 3 years. That is changing. It is not official yet, but it's going to be changed to every 5 years. That criminal background check is done. But you do not need to initiate it, and you do not need to pay for it. That's all covered by the church. However, you do have to give your consent. So the way that this works is Leanne and Chris and I determine, according to our records, which volunteers are up to have their criminal background check done in a given year. It's not everybody, of course, because everyone's on their own personal 5-year cycle. When that happens, we trigger through our third-party system, we trigger a criminal background check for the volunteer who needs to have it done. And an email is sent to that volunteer, and it just needs you to either approve the criminal background check or decline. Obviously, we need you to approve. I'm telling you this because this is different than how we have done it before. And the reason it's important is because that email that you will get from us does not say Christ Church United Methodist. And actually, off the top of my head, I don't know what it says. If you get a strange email asking for a background check and you don't know what it is, then by all means, just call me or call Leanne or call Chris. And we can make sure and verify that you're getting not junk mail or a phishing scam or something like that, but that you're getting the real thing. It comes from a third-party source. It does not say Christ Church on it. But we need you to accept and give your consent for that so that we can get the background check done. It's required that everyone have that done every 5 years, kind of on their own cycle. Okay? And then the last item is what you are doing today, which is the annual refresher on operational procedures. Congratulations, you're getting that done today, so that's all you have to do. I want to talk about the term supervisory adult because this is an important term. A lot of people can volunteer with kids, and you do not have to be a supervisory adult to volunteer with kids. For example, having youth volunteer with children is perfectly acceptable and encouraged. Having college kids volunteer with high school kids is perfectly acceptable and encouraged. However, when we are talking about supervisory adult, we are talking about an adult who fits a particular criteria. So you all, for example, are going through this training to become supervisory adults, meaning that you can take the responsibility of supervising kids. You have to be fully screened and trained to volunteer. You have to be 18 years old, even in the nursery. And you have to be 4 years older than the oldest kid that you are supervising. I will give an example. Some of you may know Allie Reeves. Allie Reeves grew up in this church, and she was in our youth program and was in our One Voice program for many years, and she has continued to volunteer. And she is she's a wonderful volunteer. She is very mature. She is an excellent volunteer with the kids, and I love having her on choir tour. However, up until just this year, she could not be a supervisory adult because of her age. She was not 4 years older than a senior in high school. So she could not be in a supervisory role. She could not drive the kids, even though I would trust her with my own children. According to the policies that we're following, she could not do those things because she was not 4 years older than the oldest kid. So lots of people can volunteer, but not everybody qualifies as a supervisory adult. All right? And now we get to the real heart of the matter, ladies and gentlemen. This is the primary rule of how Safe Sanctuary operates. If you remember nothing else that we're talking about today, this is the most important thing to remember, which is that you are never to be alone with a child. You are never to be alone with a child. There are always to be 2 unrelated adults with children at any given time. That includes events that happen inside the church. That includes events that happen outside the church. Anything that is a Christ Church event. Don't be alone with the kids. You may say to yourself that makes common sense. Of course, why would I be alone with the kids? And it does make common sense, but you would be surprised how often a situation arises in which it would be way more convenient for you to just take that kid to the bathroom and be done with it. Or for you to just, I'll just take all these kids. Or, I'll drive. You need an extra driver? I'll drive. Put them all in my car. Well, before you do all that, we have to make sure that we are following those Safe Sanctuary protocols. Safe Sanctuary applies to cars. So we cannot have one supervisory adult with a car full of kids. That'd be way more convenient. But again, that increases risk. And we want to make sure that we have 2 unrelated adults at all times with our kids. And that is the crux of what Safe Sanctuary does. Now, there are opportunities in which you don't necessarily have to have 2 in every room. So for example, let's say you're down in the youth area, and let's say you've got room 002 and you've got room 001. You've got some kids doing one activity in 002, you've got some kids doing something in 001. Let's say Chris and I are working and we have 1 volunteer. Let's say it's Alex. Now we really ought to have 4 total volunteers if we're going to have 2 different rooms. 2 volunteers in this room over here, supervisory adults, not just folks off the street, and then 2 supervisory adults over in the other room. That would be the right way to do it. But let's say we had a 4th volunteer, and that 4th volunteer, their car broke down and they couldn't make it. What do? Do we cancel youth group? No, we can still make it happen if Chris is in one room and I'm in the other room, and then we keep the doors open, and then Alex goes back and forth. Safe Sanctuary does allow for that kind of policy. So if you are in a bind and you need a little bit of help, this is the way that we can make that happen. The last line there, like I said before, abusers thrive on secrecy, isolation, and manipulation, and they're good at it. They have practiced and they are good at it. They know how to break rules in a way that it kind of blurs the lines. That's what they're trying to do. They don't want to make it obvious what they are doing. Isolation is what they are trying to do. So we are taking that out of the equation. There is no isolation. We're going to have 2 unrelated adults at all times because that's the best way that we can prevent that isolation from happening. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about interpersonal boundaries. It is a good idea to have windows in all your classrooms. It is a good idea to keep your door open. And it is a good idea to operate with your kids in a way that if anyone were to walk by and see what was happening, they wouldn't possibly suspect that anything inappropriate was happening. We're not going to swear in front of our kids. We are not going to use illegal drugs. We are not going to use alcohol, fireworks, weapons, etc. Those things may seem obvious. I will add to that list Let's not tell off-color jokes with our kids about those particular subjects to give the kids any sort of sense about where we stand on those types of things. I think it's important for us to make sure that we model Christ to our kids at all times, not just when it's convenient, but at all times during the things that we do. I think that's very important. No questionable physical contact, hand holding, extended hugs, kissing, etc. Obviously, you should not be doing that with the kids, but we also, volunteers, we really don't want you to do that with each other. So let's just make sure that that is not necessarily the time or the place for that kind of behavior. Males and females are always to have sleeping quarters kept separate. So for those of us who are planning events that are off-site or things in which there is a sleepover, we need to make sure that the supervisory adults that we have are gendered enough that we can provide support for one room and another room like that. First aid. Every group is supposed to have someone who is certified in first aid. Mission team, scout patrol, youth group, etc. This is particularly important if you are doing things off-site. So when I plan for choir tour, for example, I need to make sure that there's somebody on choir tour who is first aid certified and can take the responsibility for that sort of thing. We're going to talk about advance notice to parents. This falls more on the side of Leanne and Chris and myself, but it does apply to everybody in case people were to ask questions about, well, what's happening in youth group tonight, or what's going on. We believe in the importance of transparency. We believe in the importance of telling and making sure that our parents know exactly what's going on, and we want to be very upfront with those things. So if we are planning an event, we want to be very clear about what the drop-off time is, what the pickup time is, are there any costs or fees, what do people need to pack, etc., etc. I have a colleague who used to do, I don't know if he does it anymore, but he used to do, when he would do choir tours in the summer, every once in a while he would do a mystery tour. And he planned the whole tour, but he didn't tell the kids where they were going. Presumably he told the parents. I hope he told the parents. I honestly have no idea. But that is not the kind of thing that we typically do here at Christ Church, because we just believe in transparency. We want the kids to know what we're doing. We want the parents to know what we're doing. We want to honor everybody and their individual needs as much as we can. So no surprises is basically the way that we do things here. We want to make sure that we are sharing, maybe even oversharing with families so that they know exactly what it is that they are signing their kids up for. Okay. Off-campus events, trips, and one-on-one, all of the same policies that we have already talked about apply. Parents have to give written permission for their kids to go. We typically get that done in one big form here at Christ Church instead of several little forms. So we encourage families to fill out a family participation form, and that signature then carries over for any events that we might do off campus. We do create a ratio of one adult for 5 kids or one adult for 10 kids with appropriate male, female adults, depending on the ages. For younger kids, if we are doing an event with younger kids, we're looking to find one adult for every 5 kids, so we have lots of adults. If I'm taking, say, 40 kids on choir tour, I need at least 4 adults to go with me, 2 male and 2 female. I am fortunate I have many more than that, but that is what Safe Sanctuary requires in terms of making sure that we have enough supervision. All adults must be supervisory adults. So if there are youth helpers or if there are college alumni helpers, they are more than welcome to come. But they can't do the same things that a supervisory adult can do. They cannot count for that 2-adult rule. They don't count for that. They can't drive kids, on and on and on. So we have to be very careful about those types of things to make sure that Safe Sanctuary is followed. Like I say, it's clunky. It can be awkward, and it's certainly not how it was when I grew up in youth group. It was never this complicated. But that doesn't mean it's not good, and that doesn't mean that it's not appropriate. So, all right. Good, excellent. This screen is the one that I think is the one that's the least cut and dry. What we're going to talk about is mentoring. Everything that I've talked to you about is pretty black and white. Yes, we do this. No, we don't do this. You have to have 2. You can, those types of things. It's all pretty cut and dry. But in actuality, when you work with kids, very little is cut and dry. Very few situations work out the way that you think they're going to. And so you are all very frequently presented with situations in which a real opportunity for ministry emerges. and you don't want to lose that opportunity. Because of course, what we want to do here is not just follow protocols. What we want to do is live into the witness of Jesus Christ with our kids, help them grow in their faith. That's why we're all doing this. That's why I do this. So how can I do that while still keeping kids safe? Let's say you are with a group of kids, and a kid comes up to you. Let's say he's 14, and this 14-year-old kid says, "Dan," or Dr. Dan, as they like to call me, "Dr. Dan, I have a problem. Can you keep a secret?" Now that's interesting. Can I keep a secret? Uh, the correct answer to that question, just so you know, the correct answer to that is no. You can't keep a secret, not without knowing what the secret is. Because if I say to that 14-year-old, yes, I promise I will keep your secret, what's your secret? And that 14-year-old then says, well, the person that I'm sleeping with in my room on this trip is cutting. Or they said they want to kill themselves. Or they brought alcohol. Well, you can't keep that a secret. In fact, if there is self-harm, you are required by law to disclose that. So if someone comes to you and says, will you keep a secret? I will tell you what I have done that has worked very well for me. It's only happened a couple of times, but it worked both times. I have said to that kid, I can't keep your secret. I cannot promise you that I will keep your secret. But what I can promise you is that whatever it is that you're dealing with, I promise that I will help you. If you need to have a conversation with your parents, I will go with you and I will help you with that. I will pray you through this. I will help you with your options. I won't leave you. I won't abandon you. I'm not going to just throw you to the wolves. I will help you. But I can't promise you that I will keep a secret, because if it's something that needs to be told, my goal is to help you and to keep you safe. I've done that twice, and both times they went ahead and told me anyway. So, if that's helpful, you can use that. But we cannot keep secrets for the kids because we don't know what it is that they're about to say. And if you promise to a kid that you're going to keep a secret, and then they tell you something really heavy, now you've got a conflict of conscience, and that can create a bad situation. So that's a perfectly good example. Another example is, let's say it's first thing in the morning. This did happen. 6 o'clock in the morning. We're all sleeping in sleeping bags on some gym floor on choir tour. All of a sudden, I get kicked in the ribs by some kid, and I open up my eyes and I look up, and there's a kid with their shoes on, and they've got their running gear, and they say, "Hey, Dr. Dan, I'm going to just go run around the block a few times. Is that okay?"
No.
Well, the correct answer to that is, if you can find 2 adults to go with you, yes. But I can't let you go running in some strange town all by yourself. I can't let you do that. Does everybody see what I'm saying? If you can find 2 adults to go with you, then great. You can go, run, have a good time. Maybe we find 5 or 6 other kids that want to go. We'll just have a whole big group of you go run, and then it's perfectly safe, and that's the way to go. As tempting as it might be to just roll over and say, oh, it's so-and-so. I trust so-and-so. Well, but what happens if they run around the building and then they fall and they break their leg? I mean, I don't know, but we have to be careful about those types of things, and we have to honor that. So the right thing to do in that situation is say, if you can find 2 adults to go with you, then so be it. Let's say a kid comes to you and says, I'm having a really big problem and I'd like to talk to you privately. And your alarm goes off and you're like, ooh, but Dan told me in our training that I'm not supposed to be alone with a student. What do I do? This is a very difficult situation. It happens a lot. We want kids to come to us if they have a problem. I mean, that's part of that's part of what we're signing up for here. And we love kids and we want to help them and we want to be there for them. One time on choir tour, I had an adult and we had one youth. The youth was having a really, really hard time. And I asked that particular kid, is there an adult that you would like to speak with? And they gave the name of an adult. It was a volunteer. It was not staff, supervisory adult, female. And that was the person that the youth felt comfortable talking to. So I sort of was then in this situation where I said, okay, how do we do this? How can I create an environment that works? What we ended up doing was we ended up finding a really big room. We were staying at a church at the time. We found a really, really big space. The youth and the adult had a conversation. They were far enough away from me that I could see them but not hear them. And I just sat back there. I to this day have no idea what they talked about. but it looked like a very healthy conversation. And he felt better, and she was able to be there for him, and they were able to honor safe sanctuary policies, and it was absolutely perfect. That was a best case scenario of a way that we could honor the protocols but still help the kid. It doesn't always work out that way. And you might find yourself, not by your own choice, you might find yourself alone with a youth or with a child. And the reason that that's dangerous, not just for the child, the reason that that's dangerous for you is because if that child, for whatever reason, were to walk out of that room and tell another adult, so-and-so touched me, now we have their word against yours. And there's no one who can validate what happened. There is no one who can say for certain exactly what happened. If you find yourself in a situation with a child behind closed doors and it's just the two of you, no one knows what happened in that room. And it becomes one word against another. I have seen this happen in other places. God, thank you, Lord, it's never happened at Christ Church to my knowledge, but it can be just a really, really horrifying and terrible situation for everyone involved. And that's why it is just so important that at all costs, if you can avoid that, please do. If you can't, if something happens, you are alone with the child and whatever, then I would seek out a staff member immediately and just tell them what happened. Hey, Dan, I am so sorry. I was alone with a kid. It was just for a little bit. We had this conversation, but I wanted to let you know that happened. I'm sorry about that, but and that's probably the best thing that you can do is just go to a staff member and let them know, so that you're very transparent and proactive about a situation like that. As much as possible, that's the way to do it. You might be able to say, someone comes to you and says, gosh, I'm having a really hard time. Can we talk? And you might be able to say, you know what, I would love to talk with you. How about we ask Pastor Chris to be part of this too? He's really good at stuff like this. Something like that. That would be a great way to handle it as well. But as much as possible, we don't want to not be there for our kids. But as much as possible, we want to create a safe environment for the child, and also a safe environment for you. Okay. Now let's talk about the state law. All adults, whether you're paid or volunteer, you are required to report suspected cases to Child Protection Services. If you have reason to believe that there may be abuse, you have to report it. Now, you do not have to call Child Protection Services directly, although you are certainly welcome to do so, and we provide you with the number. You may tell a staff person in charge, Leanne, Chris, or myself, and that is just as good. And then it's on us to report that. But we have 24 hours, and that has to be reported. If you suspect child abuse or self-harm, and you do not report it within 24 hours, either to me or directly to Child Protection Services, then there are criminal penalties that can be handed down on you. So this is a very important state law. It is a requirement for everyone. I certainly hope you never have to use it, but it's important to know that that's the situation. If you suspect abuse, you have to report it. And then we let Child Protection Services decide what the right course of action is. Okay? Everybody clear on that? Very important. Let's say there's an allegation that's against a volunteer. Gosh, I hope this never happens, but let's say that it does. Let's say that a child comes to you and says, another volunteer touched me, or another volunteer hurt me, or something along those lines. Here's what I want you to do. Take the allegation seriously. Let's say the allegation's against me, and you say to yourself, well, I know Dan. Dan would never do that. Well, you have to take the allegation seriously. Every allegation seriously. Don't justify, don't explain, don't try to figure it out. That's not for you to figure out. If a child comes to you and says that they were touched by an adult, you have to take that seriously. Number 2, don't confront that adult. Don't do it. That can create a much bigger issue. It can create anger. It can create hostility. If that person is a child abuser and they have and they've done something, they've kind of come out of the hiding and done something, they may pull back and you may never be able to catch them. And then it will become a problem that goes on down the road. Don't confront. Contact Child Protection Services. Notify the staff person who immediately contacts parents. That would be me. That would be Leanne. That would be Chris. And don't speak to the media. If it were to get so bad that it were to be a situation like that, the best thing for you to do is to keep your mouth shut. This kind of sort of goes back to the issue about keeping secrets. What we don't want is for you to become part of the story. We want for you to be part of the solution. And the way to be part of the solution is to not get involved beyond doing the right thing. If you have information, you have to pass it on. We have to protect these kids. I can tell you, and Leanne and Chris can tell you, that we know that some of these kids are going through things you would not believe. And church needs to be a safe space for them. And this is all part of creating that safe space. This is what the church is going to do. If there is a report against an adult for child abuse, this is what we're going to do. Number one, we're going to call the police. Number two, we are going to call the Kentucky Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church, because that's what we are required to do. We're going to put everything in writing. We're going to call upon the church's spokesperson. The church spokespeople for Christ Church, by the way, are Eric Bryant and Shannon McConnell. So if those are not your names, you're not allowed to speak to the media. I'm not allowed to say anything either. Those are the spokespeople for Christ Church. They will prepare a statement, and they're going to cooperate fully with all authorities. Every allegation is going to be taken seriously. And that brings us to the end. It's a lot of heavy stuff, and my hope is that you will never be in a situation in which these things will apply. But child abuse is an enormous problem. It's a bigger problem than anybody can cognitively realize. And we want to make sure that Christ Church is as safe of a place as possible. And I think that is all that I have to say. Now, I know that we have some questions, but real quick, I'm going to turn things over to Leanne just to see if Leanne has anything that she would like to add. Leanne, do you have anything?
No, I think it was great. The one thing I did want to add was that the self-harm piece is new. We haven't taught that before, and that just came to our attention that is a reportable thing. So these are kids that cut, these are kids who say they're going to suicide, whatever. We have to report that. And that's kind of one of those gray areas where you feel bad reporting, but it's not our choice anymore. It's taken out of our hands. We have to report that. I think the other thing is that the awareness that everybody's trying to do safe sanctuaries and people forget, and the grace and the mercy that we need to show each other. So if you see somebody alone with a child and you realize, oh my gosh, they're over there, they're alone, they've gotten in a corner, they're isolated, whatever, feel free to be their advocate and go over and just kind of check on things or watch that situation. Don't leave the room if they're alone. Yesterday we had a situation, it was easy, but it was at confirmation, and I was just in the back with a bunch of kids. And I really appreciated that Chris was like, what were you talking about? That looked intense. And I loved that he had noticed that. And we were able to have that conversation. So that was like a cool way of Chris having my back. And I just think, just make sure that you have each other's backs. And even in the church, if I see something happening in the music thing, rather than wait till tomorrow and call Dan, I just go in and be that second adult. So have grace and mercy and jump right in there.
I agree with that 100%. I think the big takeaway from this is proactivity, that we want to help each other and make sure that if you see, oh, they really could use another adult over here, or, oh, there's something happening over here, please feel comfortable enough to jump in and be a part of the solution there to help us out with that. The other thing that I will say, and this is my last bit, is that I think that it can become almost binding, this policy, if you think about it in a very legalistic type of way. Because if you think that it's got to be this or this, black or white all the time, then you can really feel hamstrung at every turn. That, of course, is not what we want. We want you to pour into the kids, and we want you to be the love of Jesus and be the hands and feet of Christ. So think about things in terms of being on a spectrum. There is, of course, the ideal circumstance, and then there are things that might not be quite as ideal, like the roamer that I was talking about earlier. If you are down a volunteer, you can have one volunteer go back and forth. Obviously, that's not as ideal as having the appropriate number of volunteers to make sure that every room is covered. So instead of thinking about it as a yes or no, black or white, think about it in terms of, what is it that I can do to reduce risk in this situation? Is there a better way that we can accomplish this that's just a little bit safer? And I think if you approach it with that mentality, you will avoid feeling bound and restricted by the rules, and it'll be much easier for you to just very naturally kind of be there for the kids, pour into the kids in a way that's really great. So excellent. Chris, do you have anything that you would like to add before we finish? I see no questions here, so if there are any questions, now is the time.
Dan, I had one more thing too, I just thought of. But Chris, were you gonna say something?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that where it gets sort of foggy with children is, you know, they want to sit on your lap and they want to do that. And so one of the things that we tell our volunteers that work with children, the younger children get and the newer they get, is that let the children be as independent as they can possibly be. So like, for example, there is a time where you're going to take a toddler to the bathroom and they're going to need to be wiped and need help in the bathroom. Well, then you would do that. But when they are old enough to start wiping themselves, you let them wipe themselves. There are kids that if they're crying and the only way you can comfort them is to pick them up, then of course you pick them up. But we want to move towards independence and the less, and so that's what we tell everybody, even our teenagers. They love for the kids to sit on their laps. And we say we want them to feel grown up as soon as they can. So let them sit next to you and feel like a grown up. So that's kind of that's a really gray area. And again, you got to use your instincts and your best judgment on that.
Perfect. Chris?
I was trying to get to the bottom of who the email comes from, and I couldn't get an answer. It most likely comes from something called Mobilize My Ministry, or it comes from Amy Roberts. But if you all can help us figure out the answer to that question, the reason we don't have the answer is it's entirely new. We've never been able to do this entirely digitally with our new system. All we do is click a button and it kind of automates. So we need to find out that answer, but we ask for your patience.
Great. You know, I want to thank you all so much for pouring into our kids this year. It is a noble thing that you are doing. It's fun, it's exciting, it's adventurous. So thank you all so much for taking these extra steps to make sure that our kids are really well cared for. If there aren't any more questions, then I'm going to say sayonara. If you have questions later on, please don't hesitate to ask one of the three of us. We would be most happy to clarify. But thank you all so much for being there for our kids, and really look forward to a wonderful fall. So thank you all very much.
Dan Blosser, your energy makes this really bearable and delightful. Thank you so much for doing this for us. You're the best.
You got it. Thanks, guys. See ya.